We started in Richmond in 2001 and since then have expanded on the East Coast. We have offices in Metro DC region, Raleigh, Charlotte, and recently made a little push further out west with the opening of an office in Minneapolis in 2010. We are a project-based firm, so we focus on providing teams to deliver strategies and solutions for our clients. And those clients include national, global, and Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits and government agencies, and a variety of industries such as healthcare, financial services, retail manufacturing, distribution, and more. Our firm does a variety of work, including custom web development, mobile development, and our core practices, which are enterprise content management and portal integration, business intelligence, PMO and management consulting, and interactive user-centric design. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Marissa Beatty for our presentation, Creating a Digital Strategy and Making It a Reality with SharePoint.
Thanks, and happy to have so many people attending today. As Charlene mentioned, my name is Marissa Beatty. I am with the Ironworks Interactive practice and am a user experience designer as well as own the strategy and planning discipline for our practice. I've been with Ironworks for about 5 years and have been working with SharePoint since the 2003 release, doing all sorts of things from strategy and planning around SharePoint and other platforms to the IA that's necessary, as well as the user experience design, taxonomy planning, and going across public and internal sites, all sorts of different things. So as Charlene mentioned, today we're going to be talking a little bit about digital strategy and why it's important. A company's online presence is really more important than ever as technology has changed the way that people interact with brands. Many of you probably know that Facebook actually surpassed Google as the #1 website last year, and now mobile browsers are actually expected to outpace desktop browsers by 2013. So digital experience and people being able to interact with your brand across a number of different channels is becoming a critical component for marketing initiatives. And we want to make sure that as we work towards a digital strategy that is a strong consideration for how all of those fit together. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today are some of the common challenges that we see across clients that we work with in terms of digital strategy, what kind of things go into creating the digital strategy, as well as how we can portray the vision for what those strategic tactics look like, and then working to prioritize what those initiatives can translate into over time. We'll also keep that conversation mainly focused on strategy in general, and then we'll have some chance at the end to talk a little bit more specifically about how SharePoint fits into that picture, how it can support web, social, and mobile, as well as iterating for improvement and being able to scale that experience over time. So as we start to consider an internal experience, we find that a lot of our clients are often very siloed, working towards their own initiatives. We have support teams that want to use website for more self-service options to be able to reduce phone calls to their internal team members. Those teams might want to tout product features and benefits or the latest promotions to drive their numbers. IT really just wants the systems to be maintainable, while marketing is interested in making sure that the experience is consistent with the brand, conveying that vision and value consistently with the other digital channels or the offline channels. And in a lot of cases, we find that getting internal departments on the same page about the direction for that digital presence can really be challenging. Marketing is usually responsible for driving the vision, while IT is responsible for implementing that vision. And when they don't see eye to eye, it can really cause a lot of frustration. Marketing teams are usually focused on creating an experience that's an extension of the brand onto the website, and they often know what they want even if they have a hard time articulating it. So you'll hear a lot of things about consistent branding or multi-channel campaigns, being able to target and personalize things using localization to make sure that the experience is relevant for the target audience. While IT is more concerned about things like technical architecture and making sure that the solutions are scalable and they integrate well with other applications, that we know when we need custom development versus being able to use something out of the box. And in many cases, the two don't really understand each other. IT feels like marketing isn't considering the technical implications of their request, and marketing feels like IT doesn't understand what they're trying to convey with the brand values. Ultimately, that can create a divide internally that even impacts the external experience for users on any given site. So the first step really to any digital strategy is to listen to the internal teams to start to understand the business objectives of those teams, as well as the business as a whole and the technology that's available. What we really want to do is work to bridge the gap internally between the different teams that are siloed and get everyone speaking the same language, allowing marketing and communications to develop a direction that supports the brand while still being realistic for implementation and maintenance for the IT teams. But really, getting those internal teams in alignment is only part of the process. We also need to make sure that we are striking a balance between what the business needs, the business goals internally, as well as the audience needs, and understanding the competitive market. If you want to engage users on the web today, it's critical really to understand what they want from you and where they're getting those needs met today. And a digital strategy can help you balance those business priorities with the needs of your users to really define that creative and strategic direction for the future, bringing focus to your digital presence and the process that you need to run to get you there. So as we start to think about those different inputs, the first one that becomes important, as I mentioned, is really understanding the business, getting everyone on the same page by breaking down the silos, understanding the reasons behind decisions that have been made to get us to the current state that exists today, and then from there being able to identify the opportunities for moving forward. One of the things that we always do as part of a strategic process is to talk to the people, to the key people within the organization and that are part of the core team for that specific initiative to really understand the initiative and the landscape that lives in internally. Who are the key players? What are their motivations? What are the business goals for each of those groups internally, as well as what kinds of corporate strategy has been put in place? Is there a vision that the entire business is driving towards, and what are the pieces and parts of that? From there, once we've had a chance to talk to people, we're able to break down what we've heard into a SWOT analysis. We're talking about things around strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in many cases, there's a lot of overlap because weaknesses are obviously also opportunities. But a SWOT analysis lets us share that information with the core team so we can begin to ensure that it's complete and that we can start to move forward towards figuring out what those opportunities are and mitigating the risks that might be associated with threats. We also feel that it's important to do a technology review to understand the existing systems that are in place, as well as to understand the resources that are available and the skill sets that can support each of those different technologies. We do an in-depth current state analysis of the existing sites that are out there and understanding any current usability issues, also as well as understanding the depth and structure of any given site. If there are analytics in place, we want to take a look at any of the analytics that are available so that we can understand where there might be options to improve from that perspective as well. And the same goes for search engine optimization, making sure that the site content is well optimized for display on the web. The next input that's really critical in terms of strategic inputs is understanding the users that are coming to your site. So you need to know what they want and where they're getting those needs met today by listening to the things that they're asking for. And there are a lot of different ways to gather that kind of information, and it can vary depending on what the goal of the strategy is. But some different ways that we've been able to gather that user input is one through focus groups, where we have an opportunity to talk to users to understand their perspective. Focus groups are usually a moderated discussion with a number of different end users that represent a cross-section of your target audiences, where we have an opportunity to ask them about their needs and their attitudes towards certain things that are related to your brand, and even seek reactions to early ideas or concepts that might be part of that process. Surveys is also another option where we can reach out to a broader audience around some of the relevant topics that might be related to the initiative. they're typically a mixture of quantitative responses and open-ended questions that provide deeper insight into user needs, and depending on where they're placed within the process, there's an opportunity to dive a little bit further around things that we may have heard related to focus group findings or other things that have come up internally. There's also an opportunity to do some field research where you can go out and observe users actually interacting with your site or sites in the environment that they typically would interact through, and have opportunities from there to see what they're doing, as well as to understand things that they may be doing to user side or frustrations that they may be having that they would not otherwise communicate. There's also social listening, so it's important in the social media age that we live in today to know that whether or not you're participating in conversations about your brand online, that people are most likely having them. So being able to start digesting some of the information that's available from the social sphere and understand not only what people are saying, but where those conversations are taking place, and be able to begin to use that information to feed your strategic vision, either from a social perspective or a brand perspective, or even as almost an online focus group. And one of the last ways that we also look to user information is through usability testing, and this can be done a number of ways as well, either through a live site, so people can see how users would interact in a controlled environment around a number of given scenarios. So if you want to see where there might be problems with a specific process or features or functionality that people might be having issues finding within your site today, usability testing is a great tool for that. It's also something that we've used in many cases once we have some basic concepts put together to test the validity of those concepts with users through an interactive prototype. And then the last critical piece of a strategy is really understanding the market that your business is in. Being able to look beyond the organization to understand the trends that are out there and how they may or may not apply to your business. So decisions are really grounded in things that are feasible for you and not things that are based on hype. And a good example of that would be that you hear a lot of things, especially around mobile and about apps right now. A few years ago, there was so much around social media that everyone was saying we want to do social media, have to do social media without really understanding exactly what that meant or how the channels applied to them. And you hear a lot now where people want to create an app and without a really clear understanding of whether or not something of that magnitude is necessary. So taking a look at the market that's out there to really understand how your competitors are positioned within the business, which channels they're using to interact with their customers through either social media or within the context of their own website, what kind of features and functionality that they offer as part of their experience, as well as the different technologies that they've chosen to take advantage of in terms of some of the mobile applications that are out there. So they have a mobile website or a mobile application, or if they've gone so far as to create something for a tablet device like an iPad, and understanding really what the value in those is so that you can start to see that landscape and begin to translate that into things that are going to make sense to your business. So there's a lot of different things that can be included as part of a strategy, a lot of different inputs that we look to in a combination of these things. Obviously, analyzing all of this research together provides a lot of information and can begin to help us get to see a clearer picture of what opportunities there are to inform a strategic direction. But it's really critical as part of this process, once that vision begins to take shape, that we work to portray that in a way that is going to get people excited internally about all of that information. So at this point, you've digested a lot of things about findings reports, and you're trying to figure out how to move forward. And what we've found as part of this process, once you actually have the strategy and you're ready to create that vision to share with the organization, is that no one really wants to read a report. A lot of text tends to make things really difficult for people to digest, and they start to glaze over after a while and don't always have a clear understanding about that strategic direction or what it is that we're actually trying to say. And so we've found that there are better ways to present that kind of information to make it really more interactive and interesting to help get people excited about the strategy as an internal team and to be able to work towards getting started. And so one of the things that's a piece of that is the concept of storytelling. We all understand stories, and it's an important piece in terms of this process, we feel, to be able to start to demonstrate everything that you've learned and translate it into a story that can be easily digested by the people within your organization so that as you need to share that vision with people, they find it easy to understand. So you start with, right now we're here, and you talk about all of the different things that are within the current state, as well as the competitive findings, and then be able to say, and this is where we want to go, to start to be able to present that vision. And there's also an opportunity from that perspective then to, as part of that vision, this is how we anticipate to get there. And if you can incorporate that along a storyline that can make use of some of the information that you know now about your users and things that are going to be relevant for the different areas of the business, it's helpful for people to be able to begin to digest that information. And so we've also all heard the saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. So incorporating not only the concept of storytelling, but also the use of concepts and images as part of that process is another way that we found to be extremely valuable for people in conveying a vision. And it gives us opportunities to react to information that is available and be able to digest the things that are there. IT can look at it from their perspective and say, that's great, there's a lot of interesting data here, but where does that data reside? We don't have that data now. How can we start to work towards that information? Marketing and communications can begin to envision how the digital world fits together for them. When and where and how do we integrate that social media as part of this process? What makes most sense for mobile? How can we drive dynamic updates? What content exists today? What needs to be created? Those kinds of things. And we've also found that as you begin to portray that vision, it's important to pull out the critical pieces of that and weave those into your storyline so that you have an opportunity to show what those concepts are and how all of those things fit together, really keeping in mind that a strategy, a digital strategy, is about more than just your website, and it's about different digital touch points that people can interact with your brand throughout different channels on the web. So then moving into prioritization. After you have that strategic vision in place, there are a number of different tactics that come to play in terms of actually being able to take that vision and line it up over time. We work with clients to help to prioritize each of those tactics and begin to be able to line those things up over time to start to show how all of those pieces fit together and what order they might need to fall in. This is often a step where we try to match things back to a corporate vision that may be in place and a number of different roadmaps that already are existing internally to try to show how those things line up as well as who might be responsible for those things. And it's this roadmap that actually gives us an opportunity to move into the initial stage of really beginning to implement that vision. And it's critical to make sure that, especially with the initial phase, that there's a solid foundation that we can build on to scale that vision over time. Because given the number of different pieces that have gone into a strategy and all of the things that come out as part of that vision, we often find that there are a lot of great ideas there, but not everything is realistic for the first phase. And so as we begin to prioritize that, we want to make sure that as we're building things, that there's an opportunity for us to build onto that and extend that experience as necessary in a really valuable way for end users over multiple phases. So then as we begin to consider SharePoint as part of this process and how that fits in, as I mentioned, we feel that strategy is really something that's in many cases separate from the technology that's there, although it's a consideration we want to make sure that has been accounted for. As we move into this area, a strategy needs to be able to support the different contexts or the channels that users are actually accessing and interacting with your brand through. So you have your website, which might also have microsites or landing pages off of it, applications that may need to be associated with that, whether they're integrated in with it or a separate site altogether. There may be widgets that are specific to things like alerts and things of that nature. There's also the social aspect and seeing how different users are interacting with your brand across different areas of social networks, as well as ways that they might want to be able to interact with your content within the context of your own site. So things like ratings and reviews, as well as commenting and discussion forums, or how you might be using blogs to get your message out there and improve your search engine optimization. And of course, there's also mobile. So what content are people interested in accessing from a mobile site? Is it a pared back set of the original content that's available? Are they interested in text messaging services? Do they want to have to download an app, or are they happy with a mobile touch site? So all of those things really there are a number of different directions that you could go, but SharePoint really begins to provide a unified platform for supporting that vision, becomes the foundation that is really integrated, scalable, and flexible to allow you to extend that experience over time as you need to move into some of these different channels. So in terms of the web specifically, SharePoint 2010 offers web agility really through that integrated platform, as I mentioned, which allows content owners to begin to engage with users, whether it's through the context of their own site, through dynamic promotions, and be able to manage the content that's interesting and relevant for them, but IT still has an appropriate level of control. So really, SharePoint 2010 gives an opportunity for web publishers to own and maintain their own content without having IT as a bottleneck. There are a lot of great features that are part of 2010 that help to improve the experience. So one of them is improved taxonomy, being able to really easily tag the content that lives in your site, have a structured metadata so that everything is discoverable and findable, and we can begin to do things like target content for personalization as well as localization. And there are opportunities to create a customizable look and feel using the different master pages and page layouts that are available in SharePoint, as well as using custom styling through CSS and XSLT to make sure that that experience really ties back to the branding that's going to be important for you. There are opportunities to integrate and store more digital media as part of your SharePoint platform, as well as making things more interactive and interesting using things like Silverlight and the different media web parts that are available. There's a simplified contributor interface that allows content contributors to very easily update new information, as well as incorporating things like workflow, so that if you have a publishing path that requires approval, that there are opportunities to make sure that things go through the right path while they're needing to get approved. There's also a lot of great functionality that's available with search, and SharePoint 2010 is also has some new functionality where they've integrated with FAST for really extensive search, where you can take advantage of the different metadata that's been associated with all your content and be able to really provide an extended experience in those areas as well. There's also opportunities to tie closely into the analytics that are available and really drive that experience over time, and making sure that you can refine that experience as necessary. In terms of mobile, as the mobile space evolves and users demand more and more features, SharePoint is really designed to help adapt as technology continues to emerge. Some of the things that are currently offered out of the box are things like browser auto-detect for mobile devices to display, adjust accordingly, RSS feeds for syndicating basic content, or mobile-enabled lists and libraries depending on the types of content that you need to be able to display to your users. There's also opportunities to create custom styling and master pages for display on mobile devices to help improve that experience for people that are accessing your content through their mobile phone. There are also opportunities for things that may cross over into more internal sites, things like a mobile site or a mobile office integration as well. And then lastly, in terms of social, we've heard a lot over the last few years about the need and desire for users to have more social integration as part of their ongoing web presence. And so SharePoint 2010 has a lot of different social features that are available out of the box and also allows for integration with other social properties like Facebook or Twitter in terms of creating an experience that is integrated with your own site. Content ratings is one thing that is available out of the box, being able to really easily add star ratings to different list items or documents that may be available, and that also ties back in to relevancy for search results. There's social bookmarking so that you can easily be able to tag things that are relevant for you as a user and then begin to even create your own taxonomy to be able to find that content very easily once you come back to a site. Very interesting user profile functionality so that you can come in and have an area where your user information is readily available, as well as things like status updates and news feeds around people that you may be somehow connected to as part of that network. There also is blogging functionality so that you can very easily, from the context of your own site, be able to create blogs and integrate things like commenting and rich media as part of those blogs, wikis that are available and probably more functional for the most part for internal sites, and then also being able to extend some of that metadata and tagging functionality into tag cloud web parts that can display within the context of your own site as well. And really, as we begin to consider what that experience looks like and building that foundation, it's important to consider this as part of a phased opportunity. A strategy really becomes a journey, and it's something that we feel like it's not necessarily a big bang approach. There may be a big bang as part of the first phase, but it's important to be able to review and refine that strategy over time as it relates to your roadmap, and making sure that there are different pieces of this process that can help you to discover new information about how users are actually interacting with your brand, whether it's through your website or through a mobile device or within a social channel, and be able to take that information and begin to refine it so that you can improve that experience over time. And going back to one of the things that we discussed earlier on as part of this process is the need for IT and marketing to really be able to continue to work together towards that common vision and stay aligned with that roadmap as it makes sense for the business. One of the ways that is really important as part of the strategy and that ongoing iterative development is to make sure that you have success measures that you can look to as part of that process to see how well the site is performing or the promotions that you're including are performing, and be able to incorporate analytics as part of your site so that you can begin to not only see what is going on from the IT side, being able to look at the data that's been associated with those things, but to also put that marketing spin on it and that user experience side of things to begin to understand the why part of it, so that you have the opportunity to bring those two sides together, and through the analytics that will be available to you, to be able to make some decisions that make sense for keeping your strategy on track over time, and then deciding internally which direction is going to be the best for that ongoing presence. All right, and we are going to leave some time for questions at this point, and just to let you know, we also have Brandon Anderson, who is one of our front-end engineers, with us today, as well as Scott Tyndall, who's one of our SharePoint architects. So should you have questions that are specific to strategy or some of the more of the front-end pieces or the integration side, feel free to jump in with those as well.
Okay, this is Charlene again. If you haven't question yet, click again on the Q&A menu item on the top left-hand side of your live window meeting, and go ahead and send us those questions. There we go. We do have a question, and it says, do you have some live examples of intriguing page layout or customized designs?
This is Brandon Anderson. We do have some publicly facing SharePoint customization, UI customizations. I'm not sure who want to close, I guess, as clients, but we can certainly make those available with the notes on the presentation, and we'll indicate whether they're 2007 or 2010 for SharePoint.
Okay, another one of our questions is it always necessary to have all of the inputs mentioned to develop a strategy?
This is Martha. It's not always necessary. It always depends on the projects that's at hand, as well as the amount of the clients might have going into that process. We do always stress that it's important to make sure that you have a combination of business research as well as market research and user research, and some of the actual tasks that can be part of that can be dependent on the amount of information that the business is actually able to provide. So, for example, we may choose to do only a survey instead of focus groups, depending on how extensive that user research information is that has already been provided. We might also decide to do a specific competitive analysis in terms of the market if there is a lot of functionality that's available across a number of different websites that we know has functionality or features either for your peers or for your direct competitors, to see how those things might line up and make sense for the most sense related to that strategic vision. Okay. So one of the next questions that we're getting is, can a digital strategy bridge internal and external sites? So basically, intranet as well as your public site. And the answer is absolutely, and especially given that SharePoint is such an extensible platform, there are a lot of agilities that are gained from being able to combine that experience, specifically around things like content contribution, or if there are things that you may want to be able to share internally and externally. We're actually in the process of creating a strategy now for one of our clients that covers an internal portal as well as 3 externally facing sites to look for efficiencies in ways that the content can be shared across those platforms, as well as being able to share some of the branding information and adjusting the styling as necessary for the internal versus externally facing sites.
We have a question also. Do you have any recommendations for training the enterprise while deploying SharePoint?
It's always critical to provide SharePoint training, and the level of training is often dependent on the skill sets that you have internally. We always make sure that there is contributor training so that the people that are going to be responsible for maintaining and managing the content going forward are able to keep that information fresh, so that they are not required to go through IT as a bottleneck to that process, and they can update things as necessary to make sure that they're timely and relevant depending on the marketing initiatives that are in place. In terms of more in-depth training, it, again, is dependent upon the organization and the people that are actually going to be maintaining that site, but the contributors is most definitely something that we always focus on. Okay.
Next question is about, do you have some specific examples of the kinds of out-of-the-box tools that might be useful for analytics? And these are referenced in SharePoint 2010.
That is something that is, again, dependent on the client. Anything can be integrated with SharePoint. I don't have as much technical knowledge around which the best tools are in terms of SharePoint 2010 for tracking and measuring, but there are opportunities to take the success measures that are part of that strategy and tie them into whatever analytics tool that has been integrated with SharePoint 2010.
This is Scott. With 2010, there is an out-of-the-box web analytics reporting functionality that's new with 2010, and it gives you some basic reporting functionality such as page views, visitors, queries for your search reports or search results, and inventory reports on the types of storage usage and the number of sites that you have. So it does give you some basic analytic functionality, but you may wish to extend that with a more robust solution.
And I'm not sure if this is a technical question or not, but does SharePoint have language capabilities? And what best practices have you seen in managing language requirements?
I think there's probably something that Scott and I can both kind of respond to that. From the experience perspective, in terms of managing the language side of things, what we've done is it is dependent upon what the needs of the organization are, but there are opportunities to either translate just the navigation into multiple languages as necessary or even down to specific pages. We often find that a lot of clients aren't necessarily interested in translating every page word for word, and that there are either only certain pieces or sections of the site that may be dependent upon getting people into those areas in order to digest the information or find what they need. So there, at least from the experience and strategy perspective, there are different requirements depending on the project. But in terms of the technical side of things, I'll let Scott talk a little bit more about.
Right. So there are some language packs that come with SharePoint out of the box, and then there's some additional ones that you can install if necessary. You'll want to keep that in mind if you have any custom development to make sure that it's going to support the multiple languages and play well with that. Those are just a couple things to keep in mind.
Hey, can you tell us, please, what goes into a prioritization workshop?
In terms of a prioritization workshop, we generally have a number of actionable tactics that are created as part of a strategy that line up with the strategic vision. And so when we work with our clients in a prioritization workshop, it is taking those actionable tactics as well as other knowledge that we have about the organization's business goals or the organization's corporate vision, and being able to begin to prioritize those things based on the technical difficulty as well as the value to the business and the value to the users. And by scoring each of those things, we're able to begin to align those tactics in a way that helps us divide things into phases that make sense for implementation. And then with that going into that prioritization workshop, we're able to come out of that and actually create that detailed roadmap, which then starts to line up all of those things as we showed as part of the presentation into a document that your organization can begin to follow loosely over time towards achieving that vision.
Looks like we have one more question, and it is a request for recommendations for resources related to storytelling.
And there are a couple different books that I have found useful. One of them specific to user experience is called Storytelling for User Experience. It's by Rosenfeld Media, and they've got a lot of interesting things in there that help you begin to break down the data that you have as part of your systems into developing user stories that you can create as part of that strategy, as well as to use ongoing over time to refine that vision as necessary. There's also a really great book by Nancy Duarte, which is called Resonate, and it's all about presenting visual stories as part of a presentation to help keep people's interest, so that you end up with presentations that have a lot of visuals and help to walk you through a story rather than a number of different slides that are just really text-heavy and full of bullet points.
Okay, that's actually going to wrap it up. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in, so we did manage to finish a little bit under an hour today, so that's great. We will make the full presentation available as a link from ironworks.com by tomorrow. Thank you again so much for attending today's webcast, and make sure to register for our final webcast in the series, SharePoint as a Consolidation Platform, using SharePoint for your other application. That's scheduled for Tuesday, April 5, and you'll find the link to this presentation, our previous presentations, and more information about upcoming events. Go to ironworks.com and click on the link for SharePoint for a Business webcast series under News and Events on the homepage. Thanks so much, guys.